5.76 square meters. I pay 600 for it.
You pay up to 400, 450 euros for a room that you share with another person. So I just thought that's the norm. That's basically how it happens.
It's crazy that you have to fight this hard just to build a normal life, but it's worth standing up for yourself.
Berlin is facing a brutal housing market where landlords can make a killing by renting out furnished rooms on short-term leases. More often, it's the newcomers here being exploited. This is the story of young people struggling to find a home in Berlin. Berlin's Neukölln district. On Hermannstraße, we meet a young Russian man. Let's call him Misha.
Hi, this is my apartment. We have 8 people here and 8 rooms. So each one has their room. They're from 7 to, I would say, 15 square meters. We have a kitchen. We have 2 bathrooms.
This used to be a regular 4-room apartment until it was divided with drywall partitions. It now has 8 rooms, rented out separately and for no longer than 1 year at a time.
This was 1 room. Now they're divided in 2 smaller rooms.
Even decorative ceiling molding has been split in 2.
That's my room. It's the smallest one. Oh, well, yeah, it's very it's very narrow.
Misha booked the room on an online platform.
So the number reads 162 centimeters. If it goes 2 meters to here and then another, so yeah, it's 360 centimeters. 5.76 square meters. Wow. I think it advertised for like 7. I pay 600 for it, which is steep, to say the least, but it's not bad. I've had worse in my time in Berlin.
Misha takes us to see where he lived before. He came to Berlin to study, but he also wanted to leave Russia for political reasons. He attended a private university and earned a bachelor's degree in app and web design. This was his first room in Berlin, also booked on an online platform. It was inside a former storefront.
I feel like I could cry. That was horrible when I, moved in. First day, very tired. It was like a long flight, 15 hours or something. And I move in this tiny room, and it's dirty, and it's like there's no ventilation. I can't open the window. It's grimy, dusty, kind of horrible. I don't know. When you went to shower and someone would turn on this ventilation, it would start blowing very cold and very stinky air that smelled of like 20-year-old grease and like meatballs, basically. That was horrible.
He paid a total of 730 euros a month for it. Misha says that in Russia, the same amount of money would have covered a comfortable apartment and his living expenses for an entire month. Back at Misha's current place on Hermannstraße, he meets up with a former tenant. Bjorn lived here with friends in a shared apartment for more than 4 years until 2024. Back then, most tenants held permanent leases. The building was a typical Berlin apartment house.
There was a real sense of community here. People brought each other cake, left treats outside doors for St. Nick's. I think neighbors would babysit even.
In many of the apartments today, landlords are renting out furnished rooms on short-term contracts. Only a handful of long-term tenants remain.
It never looked this bad when I lived here. And here, there was none of this either.
Bjorn's old apartment had a layout similar to Misha's.
Hi.
But back then, the rooms weren't divided up.
The change is full on, especially inside the apartments. These rooms were beautiful, big, bright, and spacious. Like charming old Berlin buildings. There's not much of that left now.
Oh, that looks way more spacious.
Yes, way more spacious. It's very bright.
While Bjorn was still living here, the landlord began dividing rooms in vacant apartments. The residents reported it to the district authorities. This building lies within a neighborhood preservation area where altering floor plans like that isn't allowed.
It's wirklich absurd.
It's really absurd how it's turned out. When the last apartments that became vacant, when longtime tenants had to leave or got pushed out for whatever reason, the district stepped in and stopped any further subdivision of the apartments.
The district and the landlord are now facing off over Misha's apartment. Bjorn's shared apartment situation came apart when the primary tenant moved out. The property management company refused to offer the remaining roommates a new lease.
Wir wären gern geblieben.
We would have loved to stay. We had a great four-person apartment, and in today's housing market, you just can't find places like that anymore for 4 people.
You know, this sounds like a very nice apartment. I would love to live there.
Yes, it was super nice.
Yeah.
When you have an opportunity.
Back then, each of Bjorn's roommates paid 400 euros a month, which included utilities and internet. Misha pays much more for his tiny room.
I'm just realizing 600 for 6 square meters, right? You're paying like 100 euro per square meter.
Something like that.
So how can landlords charge these prices? Germany's rent cap does not apply to short-term rentals. Landlords can charge whatever they want. And by renting out every room separately, they can make even more money. On social media, many self-declared financial advisors are pushing the strategy.
When you turn a 3-room apartment into a 3-person flat, you have 3 sources of income instead of 1.
This trick helps you make more money from your property. You're no longer renting to one person or one family, but to several people.
With flashy graphics, advisors explain how landlords can triple their income.
That way you increase the total rent well beyond what you could charge a single tenant.
Like many Berlin districts, Neukölln wants to put an end to this lucrative short-term furnished rental business inside neighborhood preservation areas, including the building where Misha lives. District Councillor Jochen Biedermann from the Green Party has made it a priority. Rents in Neukölln have risen rapidly over recent years.
Like the rest of Berlin, Neukölln faces an extremely tight housing market that has become even tougher in recent years. This whole business of furnished short-term rentals has exploded and is wiping out affordable housing. That's a big concern for us, because we work hard to maintain stable neighborhoods here.
Many in Neukölln have low incomes. Families often squeeze into apartments that are too small or leave the district altogether. Housing law falls under federal authority in Germany. But here at the building on Hermannstraße where Misha lives, Jochen Biedermann wants to set a precedent. He has ordered the landlord to stop offering rooms on temporary contracts.
When landlords offer an entire apartment just as a temporary rental, and at prices that ignore the rent cap that applies to regular apartments, we say that isn't acceptable in neighborhood preservation areas because it doesn't serve the needs of the existing local community. In the end, though, this remains an open legal question. The administrative court will decide it, and possibly other courts after that as well.
Jochen Biedermann hopes Misha's temporary home case will set a precedent. The court has not yet issued a ruling. A ban on short-term rentals would apply across all 82 social preservation areas in Berlin. We want to know what the landlord has to say, a company called Deutsche Boden. Its offices sit in a large commercial building in the heart of the city. Multiple requests for information went unanswered. Now we're knocking on the front door. But the owner wouldn't speak with us and didn't respond to our questions. Many people have lived in this building on Hermannstraße in the Neukölln district, people who arrived and had to leave again. Among them were the brothers Nur and Saif Atala. They rented 2 rooms there up until February 2025. They were allowed to use the shared spaces, but their contract said the landlord could come into the apartment during the day, even without advance notice.
It was just very difficult living somewhere where you felt you couldn't stay long, and the landlord could just walk in every day. They had the keys. They came into the apartment for random inspections. It was just weird. You never really felt at home there. We only got a 1-year contract at first. I wanted to extend it. They just said no, that wasn't possible. They said we were only allowed to stay in the apartment for 1 year.
We only had 3 weeks to find something new. That was obviously very stressful, so I only have bad memories of it.
We met Nur and Saif Atala in their new neighborhood in Prenzlauer Berg. The brothers come from Finland. Nur works in the cultural sector, and Saif is studying business administration. They like Berlin and want to stay here, but they don't want to have to keep moving around.
You always feel like a nomad. The idea that you could build a long-term home somewhere, that's kind of a dream. Almost none of my friends have that opportunity here in Berlin.
Now they're living on the Greifenhagener Straße. In this building. They also found this apartment on an online platform. Most of the people living here too have temporary contracts. We aren't allowed to film inside. The brothers are in a dispute with their landlord.
We'd really like to show you our apartment, but the landlord has already sent us warnings. They say we've damaged things in the apartment. We're afraid of getting more warnings.
This is what the apartment looks like. 3 rooms, fully furnished, nearly 110 square meters. They have a third roommate who wants to remain anonymous.
We pay €800 each, 3 of us, so that's about €2,400 all up. We each have our own room, sadly no balcony, but we have a kitchen and a bathroom.
The landlord just thought up an excuse for the short-term lease.
Our contract stated a reason for the time limit, that we were only in Berlin temporarily, for an exchange semester, and in my case, a project. None of that's true. We live here. This is our home. We want to build our future here. We told the landlord that, and he simply didn't care.
They too live in a neighborhood preservation zone. Residents here are supported by the district councillor for urban development. He wants to take action against the rental model in the brothers' building.
We're seeing a real wave of this. Certain property owners think they can ignore the law and turn regular apartments into furnished rentals at outrageous prices. Several thousand euros a month. We've dealt with this building for years. Honestly, most of the building has now been emptied out. Last year, we used the chance to request the lease agreements.
A group of locals who are fighting displacement is supporting the brothers. At a press conference, Nur Atala explains what happened next.
In June, after we'd already lived in the apartment for 3 months, the landlord suddenly showed up at our door and said, "Hey, you need to sign the contract again." He didn't know I spoke German. He said it was exactly the same contract. I quickly read through it and realized it was completely different. No furniture surcharge, no time limit, just a nice normal lease agreement. I secretly took photos of it, then I signed it. He left and never answered our emails, our calls, or anything else ever again.
The brothers then took the 2 different contracts to the district authorities. Suddenly, the councillor had evidence against the landlord.
I filed a criminal complaint against the owner. Because he gave us falsified lease agreements.
Der hat uns gefälschte Mietverträge gegeben.
We had requested the contracts because, just like in Neukölln, we wanted to take action.
Dagegen vorgehen wollten.
On a Friday at the end of March, Pankow Against Displacement organizes a neighborhood walk. Many show up for it. People who see fixed-term rental problems in their own buildings. Greifenhagener Straße is not an isolated case. The landlord of Nur and Safe Attila appears unfazed. He insists on the fixed-term lease and wants to evict the brothers. He has already filed for eviction. The brothers plan to fight back and say they are grateful for the support from the tenants' initiative.
We felt very intimidated by the landlord. This is a multi-million-euro business. We're just two brothers. But seeing people come together like this gives you hope that something really can change.
Why won't the landlords of Nur and Safe Attila back down? Why are they only offering temporary leases? Our inquiries have gone unanswered. At their business address in an upscale part of town, several company names appear, all part of a complex corporate network. The building on Greifenhagener Straße belongs to the company Esbjerg. We leave another written inquiry. Several days later, a communications consultant for Esbjerg responds with this statement. Esbjerg Invest GmbH fully complies with all of its legal obligations, particularly in tenancy, civil, and administrative law. To our knowledge, these allegations lack any reliable factual basis. Since this April, furnished short-term rentals in neighborhood preservation areas require approval from district authorities. Berlin hopes the new rule will help curb temporary room rentals. In 2025, nearly half of all housing listings were furnished, short-term rentals, marketed through online platforms. Wonderflats is one of them. We meet with one of its founders, Jan Hase. He defends the business model, arguing that there's a need for this type of housing, especially for skilled workers coming from abroad.
If I come here not knowing whether I'll make it through my probation period, signing an open-ended 3-year minimum lease simply isn't an option. I need time to arrive and settle in. I need a fully furnished place first. That gives me the freedom to get established here in the first place.
But does that justify high prices for tiny rooms like Misha's? The image of carefree and flexible temporary housing has little in common with the reality facing the newcomers to Berlin we spoke with.
We also see people exploiting the current market, and poor quality furnished apartments are part of the problem. We'd welcome regulations that set minimum standards, but it's wrong to judge the entire sector based on a few bad apples.
That's why he opposes banning the business model altogether. In the districts, however, politicians hear from many angry residents who say the practices are destroying their neighborhoods.
We need strong mechanisms. We need real penalties. In existing buildings, rents might be €7 per square meter. These landlords are charging 40 or 45 euros per square meter. They'll always find some new way to get that money. There are very few industries with returns like that.
High profits from renting out rooms are one thing, but some landlords even take it a step further. Instead of renting tiny rooms, they rent out individual beds. That was Sahil's experience. He's from India and came to Berlin to study. The Indian student community is now the largest in the city. Sahil started looking for housing while he was still at home. On YouTube, other Indian students shared their experiences.
All had one common thing to say, which was the living situation in Berlin is terrible. You pay up to 450 euros for a room that you share with another person. So I just thought that's the norm. That's basically how it happened.
He lived for a while in the city center, just around the corner from Checkpoint Charlie. His roommates were all Indian. The people managing the property were Indian too. He's only come back here to show us.
It's not a good feeling right now. Imagine someone coming early in the morning or in the noon in the first week of every month with sentences like, hey, give us the rent. That's formal, okay? But the passive aggressiveness and the threats that, if you do not give us the rent right now and in cash, then you can just vacate the apartment next morning, where you have a lot on stake.
The landlord denies that tenants had to pay rent only in cash. He says tenants usually pay by bank transfer. He didn't respond to questions about the high rents. He also declined to say how many people shared an apartment. As video footage shows, Sahil did not have a room of his own here, only a bed in a small room. He paid 450 euros for it. Sahil says 10 people live together in the 2-story masonette apartment.
They have like 5 rooms, which includes 1 private room, 3 rooms with 2 beds in each room. That's one of the rooms that I lived in. And then there's 1 room with 3 beds in it. So I wouldn't say that it's a very small space, but for 10 people, it's really small. There's a lot of waste dumping here, a lot of rats, and lack of cleanliness, which means that there would be a lot of insects getting into your rooms and kitchens and all.
The landlord sent us this statement. Whenever tenants reported pest or rat infestations to us, we arranged the appropriate measures. One thing is clear to Sahil: landlords are exploiting Indian students because they don't know the German laws.
There's only one particular ethnicity living in one particular area. You realize that there's definitely something fishy here. Otherwise, there would be Germans living in there. This is happening right under your nose, believe it or not.
This is just one example of housing traded exclusively within the Indian community and brokered through WhatsApp groups.
I don't know who's the admin, and I don't know who maintains them, but they're like flats in Berlin 5, flats in Berlin 6, and every one of these groups has like hundreds of thousands of members.
For our investigation, Sahil contacted several people advertising rooms in these groups. Along with one of our colleagues, he went to a first viewing. The address alone stood out. The building is part of the Studentenwerk student housing organization. The broker from the WhatsApp group never showed up. Instead, a young woman showed Sahil the room. She had been living there herself, but now had to move out. She told Sahil he could move in on the first day of the next month. The rent, 900 euros.
I don't know if it's by Studentenwerk, they wouldn't charge a student like 880 euros or something, or 900 euros for a single room. And she said that she's been living there for quite some time, but I don't know. That's why I'm going to contact him now.
Sahil calls the so-called broker.
Hello?
I don't understand. This is a Studentenwerk building. Do you have their permission?
Yes, trust me. It's like a sublease agreement, but you'll pay the rent to me.
The student housing organization informed us that subletting is allowed, but tenants have to seek approval first and can only charge the same rent they pay themselves. It's not allowed to make a profit. In fact, a room like this normally costs between 654 and 685 euros. Sahil heads to a second viewing in the Reinickendorf district. This time he is only offered beds in shared rooms. Rent for a bed in a 3-person room, 410 euros. Once again, only Indians live here. To get a rental contract at all, he would have to pay an extra fee.
They said that, we're going to get you the Anmeldung as soon as you're going to give us a service fee for like 100 euros. And I asked him what the service fee is about. He said that it's a commission for the company.
In none of the many viewings Sahil attended did he ever meet a property owner. Every time, other Indians offered him furnished beds or rooms for short-term stays at hugely inflated prices. Most of them were students themselves. It appears to be a system. Unlike many other Indian students, Sahil isn't attending an expensive private university. He's undertaking American Studies at Berlin's Humboldt University. In classes there, he's met many international students from outside the Indian community.
When I was invited by my international friends to their apartments, and a few of them who were actually paying a lot less than me, and they have such a spacious environment and better living situations, that's when I started questioning what the hell is happening.
Sahil shows us where he lives now. Just outside the city limits in Rudow in Berlin's Neukölln district. He found the attic room because a friend of a friend was looking for someone to take over the lease.
Welcome. Herzlich willkommen.
Other students live in the house, but Sahil has his room all to himself. He pays 370 euros a month. His lease has no end date.
It's such a relief. I can sleep peacefully. I don't have that anxiety that, there's somebody hanging on top of my head all the time. So I would definitely say it's a huge relief to be able to just live without having the tension of I have to move out, I have to look for another place. Unfortunately, that's not the case in Berlin, as a whole. So as much as I feel lucky, I feel bad for everybody else who suffers.
At last, he can settle down. Misha has to leave his place on Hermannstrasse at the end of April. With only a few belongings, he heads toward Prenzlauer Berg. The landlord for his new room is once again Deutsche Boden. The company rents out tiny rooms in several buildings across Berlin. At least Misha's situation has slightly improved.
No, I'm not reaching it. that's better than it was before.
His new room gives him 3 more square meters.
I pay 635, so it's almost the same for, much better. Yeah.
For Misha, this is already his 4th or 5th move in Berlin.
I would love to have, an apartment myself somewhere in Mitte or Prenzlauer or whatever, and have my own stuff, have my plants, something nice.
This contract is temporary as well. After Easter, Noor and Saif Attila meet with their lawyer.
We have news. Your landlord had filed the lawsuit because the fixed-term lease expired, essentially an eviction case. Now we've received notice that the lawsuit has been withdrawn. That means your apartment is secure.
We can stay in the apartment?
Exactly, you can stay in the apartment.
But that's not all.
The rent is far too high. We calculated it using Berlin's rent index. We evaluated the apartment based on the official criteria and found that the rent can be reduced by more than 700 euros. We're going to pursue that now.
So, how do you guys feel walking out of here today?
Relief, really. I don't even have the words. We've been fighting for months. It's incredible that you have to fight this hard just to build a normal life here. But standing up for yourself is worth it.
They hope their story will encourage others who aren't informed yet and are still paying outrageous prices for their tiny rooms to fight for their own rights.